Welcome to Fireside Chat, a devotional that takes place in the Fireside Room at Falls City First United Methodist Church in Falls City, Nebraska. This devotional follows the Revised Common Lectionary, a 3-year devotional tool which gives 4 scriptures each week. If you read all 4 scriptures each week, over the course of the 3 years, you will have read a vast majority of the Bible. Each week we will read the scriptures, and Pastor will give his first thoughts upon reading the scriptures, as well as any other interesting information there is for the week. We thank you for joining us, and we hope you find something meaningful and powerful in today's devotion. Each week I read from the Common English Bible, a recent translation by multiple Protestant denominations, including the United Methodist Church. The devotional today is for June 26th. 2022. This is the 3rd Sunday after Pentecost. We remain in ordinary time. We remain with the green color. The scriptures for today. The Old Testament reading is 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 2 and 6 through 14. The song reading is Psalms 77, 1 through 2 and 11 through 20. This can be found in the United Methodist Hymnal, number 798. The epistle reading is Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, and then 13 through 25. And the gospel reading is Luke chapter 9, verses 51 through 62. The Old Testament reading is 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 2 and 6 through 14. This is titled Elijah Goes to Heaven. Now the Lord was going to take Elijah up to heaven in a windstorm, and Elijah and Elisha were leaving Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, because the Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. Verse 6. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, because the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as you live, I won't leave you." So both of them went on together. 50 members of the group of prophets also went along, but they stood at a distance. Both Elijah and Elisha stood beside the Jordan River. Elijah then took his coat, rolled it up, and hit the water. The water was divided in 2. Both of them crossed over on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "What do you want me to do for you before I am taken away from you?" Elisha said, "Let me have twice your spirit." Elijah said, "You have made a difficult request. If you can see me when I'm taken from you, then it will be yours. If you don't see me, it won't happen." They were walking along, talking, when suddenly a fiery chariot and fiery horses appeared and separated the 2 of them. Then Elijah went to heaven in a windstorm. Elisha was watching, and he cried out, "Oh, my father, Israel's chariots and its riders." When he could no longer see him, Elisha took hold of his clothes and ripped them in 2. Then Elisha picked up the coat that had fallen from Elijah. He went back and stood beside the banks of the Jordan River. He took the coat that had fallen from Elijah and hit the water. He said, "Where is the Lord, Elijah's God?" And when he hit the water, it divided in 2. Then Elisha crossed over. This is the story of the end of the prophet Elijah's life. Elijah and Elisha are similar names, both having that Eloi or Eli at the start, which is a Hebrew root for God. That is the midst of that, as part of the name's meaning is with God. This is I'm not a particular fan of this particular story in this translation. Because what Elisha is asking for here, the younger prophet, the one that stays behind, what he's asking for is not twice Elijah's spirit. That's what it sounds like to us who are only reading the English version. What he's asking for is a double portion of the spirit. What he's asking for is an inheritance. And he's asking that he be the firstborn, that he has the right of the firstborn of Elijah's spirit. In other words, of the prophecy, of the role that Elijah has played throughout his life. Elisha is asking to be the prophet of God that follows along after Elijah, and to have the power and the authority and the ministry that Elijah has had. And remember, that was up to the point of destroying, 500 prophets of Baal one time, and destroying Jezebel, the queen. And so we see that Elisha is asking for that. And that's why Elijah says, you've asked for a difficult thing. He doesn't say, I'm going to give it to you, because it's not really his to give. It's what the Lord wants. But Elijah kind of gives him a sign, right? He says, if you are able to see me, then you will, if you are able to see me and you're able to see the whirlwind, the fire, the chariots of fire and things like that, then you will have received it. And if not, you won't. And Elisha is able to see that. And so God has granted this request. And, there's much to learn from Elisha in this story. There's some to learn from Elijah, but there's a lot to learn from Elisha, from the younger. And in particular of, when we want something, going for it. But also note that Elisha never demands anytime through the story, right? Elijah tells him, stay behind, and he asks to continue on, right? Well, I guess he kind of demands that one, right? He says, the Lord willing, I will not leave you. But I think that had Elijah ever pressed that point, the younger prophet would have backed off. He's asking to continue on in a strong way, but he's asking to continue on. And when we get there, he's asking for the double portion. He never demands it. He's asking for it. And I get the feeling that Elisha knew he was supposed to ask for it. Maybe had been told that it was coming and he needed to get it. But also that if that had not been the plan, that Elisha would have respected that and would have changed course, especially coming from the prophet's mouth. In Elijah, and there's much to be learned from that. To ask for what we want, and this particularly in prayer, right? To ask for what we want, but accept the answer no matter what. And especially if the answer comes in a way maybe we didn't expect, and yet to continue on doing that. Our psalm reading is Psalm 77, verses 1 through 2 and 11 through 20. This is listed as for the music leader according to Jeduthun of Asaph, a psalm. I cry out loud to God so that he can hear me. During the day when I am in trouble, I look for my Lord. At night, my hands are still outstretched and don't grow numb. My whole being refuses to be comforted. But I will remember the Lord's deeds. Yes, I will remember your wondrous acts from times long past. I will meditate on all your works. I will ponder on your deeds. God, your way is holiness. Who is as great a God as you, God? You are the God who works wonders. You have demonstrated your strength among all peoples. With your mighty arm, you redeemed your people, redeemed the children of Jacob and Joseph. Salam. The waters saw you, God. The waters saw you and reeled. Even the deep depths shook. The clouds poured water. The skies cracked thunder. Your arrows were flying all around. The crash of your thunder was in the swirling storm. Lightning lit up the whole world. The earth shook and quaked. Your way went straight through the sea. Your pathways went right through the mighty waters, but your footprints left no trace. You led your people like sheep under the care of Moses and Aaron. This psalm reminds me, a fantastic reminder, that in the midst of trouble, right? Verse 2, during the day when I'm in trouble, I look for my Lord. And in the midst of that, when you're looking for God, it can be very helpful to remember the stories of the scriptures, to remember the stories of your ancestors, right? The stories that grandma and grandpa said with you sitting on their knee, to remember those times when God has delivered the people of Israel, when God has delivered the church in the New Testament, when God has delivered your people and your family and your church. And to remember what God has done. It can be extremely important to help you find God, where God is now, to remember where God has been. And this psalm, I think, points us to that in the midst of the deepest troubles, looking for God, it runs to remembering the Lord's deeds, remembering God's mightiest, wondrous acts from times long past. And that is an important reminder and something that I think we need to go to faster in our own discipleship and in our own lives. The epistle reading is Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, and then 13 through 25. Christ has set us free for freedom. Therefore stand firm and don't submit to the bondage of slavery again. You were called to freedom, brothers and sisters, only don't let this freedom be an opportunity to indulge your selfish impulses, but serve each other through love. All the law has been filled in a single statement, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour each other, be careful that you don't get eaten up by each other. I say be guided by the Spirit, and you won't carry out your selfish desires. A person's selfish desires are set against the Spirit, and the Spirit is set against one's selfish desires. They are opposed to each other, so you shouldn't do whatever you want to do. But if you're being led by the Spirit, you aren't under the law. The actions that are produced by selfish motives are obvious, since they include sexual immorality, moral corruption, doing whatever feels good, idolatry, drug use and casting spells, hate, fighting, obsession, losing your temper, competitive opposition, conflict, selfishness, group rivalry, jealousy, drunkenness, partying, and other things like that. I warn you, as I have already warned you, that those who do these kinds of things won't inherit God's kingdom. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against things like this. Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified their self with its passions and its desires. If we live by the Spirit, let's follow the Spirit. I'm going to read verse 26 as well. Let's not become arrogant, make each other angry, or be jealous of each other. There is much to unpack here. This is a reading that should be read in full. Paul is making one gigantic point, and it has to do a lot more with what Paul is saying that we should do rather than what Paul is saying what we shouldn't do. There's a long list of both. The list of what we shouldn't do is longer. Paul is trying to encompass a lot of things in the midst of that, to point toward basically that everyone is guilty of something. At least I think that that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to include as many different things as he possibly can. And then pull together and say, now, let us live by the Spirit. We have forgiveness, right? God has forgiven all of us in Christ Jesus, for he died while we were yet sinners. We have forgiveness. Now let us live by the Spirit. Let us live by the fruits of the Spirit. The point of the passage is looking at what it is we're supposed to do. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There's no law against these things. These are good things. These are things to strive for. And this is what Paul is pushing us toward, pushing the church toward. And again, this is written to the church. It is written to people like you and me. Maybe it is written to you and me today. Maybe God speaks to you and me today. May we not have these fruits of the Spirit. May we not love, have joy, have peace. May we not be patient. May we not be kind. May we not be gentle and good. May we not control our selfish desires. Can we do that? I hope so. Finally, our gospel reading today is Luke chapter 9, verses 51 through 62, the end of the chapter. This begins with a heading of Jesus sets out for Jerusalem. As the time approached when Jesus was to be taken up into heaven, he determined to go to Jerusalem. He sent messengers on ahead of him. Along the way, they entered a Samaritan village to prepare for his arrival. But the Samaritan villagers refused to welcome him because he was determined to go to Jerusalem. When the disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them?" But Jesus turned and spoke sternly to them, and they went on to another village. Following Jesus. As Jesus and his disciples traveled along the road, someone said to him, "I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens, and the birds in the sky have nests, but the human one has no place to lay his head." Then Jesus said to someone else, "Follow me." He replied, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." Jesus said to him, "Let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and spread the news of God's kingdom." Someone else said to Jesus, "I will follow you, Lord, but first let me say goodbye to those in my house." Jesus said to them, "No one who puts a hand on the plow and looks back is fit for God's kingdom. These are hard verses. But to me, as I was reading them, particularly the first part, I was reminded back to the Galatians reading we just had. To that point I was making, what Paul is trying to say, right? That we need to be doing good. Don't be focused on sin. Don't be focused on the evil that was listed in there, unless it is to focus on yourself, right? Jesus says, take care of the log in your own eye before you're messing with the splinter in someone else's eye. And as I was reading, I had that in mind as I was reading this passage of Jesus sending the disciples forward into a Samaritan town, and Samaritan town doesn't accept them, which they're clearly viewing as a sin, which it probably was. And they're asking Jesus, do you want us to punish them for the sin, commensurate with the sin of not welcoming God? And Jesus chastises the disciples for that, saying, no, focus on yourself. Don't worry about them. Let God deal with them as God will deal with them. You focus on yourself, and let us continue forward to Jerusalem. And I'm always struck by the number of times that this kind of thing happens from Jesus and from Paul, but many, many times from Jesus, when Jesus is kind of confronted with the woman with adultery, right? When so many times, Mary and Martha, right? Jesus talking with Mary and Martha, mentioning that, what this person has done that you are wanting me to criticize, you're criticizing them to me. They have done well. Focus on yourself. This continues to be Jesus' continual message, and it's a message that I feel like many, both inside and outside the church, really need to hear. That is loving. That is kindness. That is goodness. Is to focus on your own actions and to focus on what you can do to be there for others and to love other people. Thank you for watching this devotion all the way through to this point. My hope and my prayer is that you have gathered something from this and that you have, that God has spoken to you at some point during this. If God has spoken to you, if you have gotten something from this devotion, please do comment down below. It really does help this devotion be seen by as many people as possible. Please do react on Facebook or YouTube. Comment down below and let me know what spoke to you and what you love about this series. As always, thank you for watching, and may God be with you until we meet again.